I'd like to invite the next panelists. I know that some of the guests on the third panel need to go, so they would be the first speakers. Maria Trifonova and Tsvetelina Penkova and Mr. Radan Kanev will be online. I hope we have a good connection.
Уважаеми гости, изключително ми е приятно да ви
Dear
приветствам.
guests, it's a great pleasure to welcome you on this sunny day to the first panel of today's conference. Ms. Tsvetelina Penkova is an MEP from the Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament, and online, Mr. Radan Kanev from the European People's Party in the European Parliament. We're going to talk about the ambitions and the agenda of the European institutions, the desire to create working and well-coordinated mechanisms within the Union and, of course, our region as well, to make the most of its huge potential for renewable energy. And also incentives are needed for low carbon generation and consumption of this energy. In the Green Deal, the European Green Deal, and adopting the climate legislation about a year ago, the European Union set up the goal for climate neutrality to be achieved by 2050. As you know, within the package Fit for 55, a number of legislative measures were outlined in order to support this achieving this goal. We need to achieve climate neutrality by 2050, and an intermediate goal is to decrease the nuclear emissions by 55% by 2030. Because of the geopolitical situation and all the events of the last few months, very dynamic, very unpredictable, additional reasons have been stated in order to speed up the green transition. It is a solution not only for the climate challenges and problems, however, it's also a solution to energy independence. Concerning diversification, the European Commission, within the REpowerEU plan, launched weeks ago, a fortnight ago, drew up a mechanism for joint purchases of natural gas. What is more important to us today, however, is that the goal for renewable energy has been increased from 40 to 45%. The share went up, and more ambitious solar strategy was stated. Then there are ambitions to simplify and coordinate administrative procedures in order to facilitate and make it easier to connect to the grid for new generators. And all the new buildings within the next few years will need to be equipped with solar panels on the roof. However, the countries in this region are a bit slow to implement all that. About a year after the deadline expired, Bulgaria and Romania have not transposed the second directive for renewables, and Greece only partially so. Ms. Penkova, what should Bulgaria focus on in order to catch up with the new level of ambition in the European institutions and prepare for the winter, which is one of the goals of this package of measures within REpowerEU? First of all, thank you for inviting me. You focused on the main issues, and in your introduction, you touched upon most of the debates and the discussions in the European Parliament and European institutions in general. It's a fact of life. The EU is a leading power in the regulations concerning climate change, climate legislation, and the Green Deal, which you mentioned. Unfortunately, within the general line of the EU, we define the guidelines, but the implementations are lagging behind. And this is what you mentioned as well. But when we talk about the speed of implementing some of the key goals, one should be more objective. Yes, you mentioned several very specific delays, which may be typical for this region. However, we need to understand this is true not only in our region and this part of Europe. There are delays in many areas, many parts of the Union, which is only natural. After all, each of the member states started this transformation from a different baseline. If some of the countries in the north, this transition to green energy actively started in the second half of the 80s, then in some other countries, the green transition in the energy sector started being discussed only a few years ago. It's only natural, therefore, that some of the member states would be slower than others. But then I would say the time frame is ambitious, but it allows enough time for each of the member states to take the necessary measures. I like to support what I say with numbers and facts. My financial and economic experience uh, is important because this is what these financial factors result into the delay. So how big is the delay in Bulgaria and this part of the continent? So what share of our energy mix goes to green sources? What would you say? I'm asking the audience, and I probably have to apologize for that. The interpreters cannot hear what the audience say. So it's between 19 and 22%, depending on the season. The average for Europe is 37%, which means that we are not that much lagging behind. And there are some countries like Austria and Denmark, which started this transition much earlier, and the share of renewables is 70%. So when we talk of an average of 37% and Bulgaria is over 20, we're not doing that badly after all. I quoted only countries which are doing better, but in the Netherlands, for instance, which is normally regarded as very green because of the public talk and the policies. But do you know what the share of green energy in the Netherlands is at the moment? About 17. And this is statistics from last year. We all understand that these numbers vary. However, what I'm trying to say is that when we talk about these issues, we need to look at facts and figures rather than assuming that Bulgaria or some other countries are lagging behind. On the contrary, we are implementing measures, we are going the right direction. Of course, certainly we are lagging behind countries like Denmark, for instance, but let us look at all 26 member states. And finally, the last thing I want to say, because Mr. Kanev is also online already, Mr. Minister Sandov mentioned the decrease of carbon emissions. It's important to also focus on facts. Last year, the emissions in Bulgaria went down by 37% compared to 1990. This is the reference year. So we are again lagging behind, but we need to be sufficiently confident, sufficiently responsible when we talk about these issues. After all, our region and our country have achieved a lot within a shorter period of time compared to other countries in Europe. Thank you. I trust the audience here is certain that we can be more ambitious in Bulgaria and in the region in view of the potential for renewables that we have. Of course, we need the skills and the knowledge necessary as well. In the audience, there are investors, and many of the companies in the sector are represented here. Mr. Kanev, my question to you is the following. In view of the higher ambition of European institutions and the wish to accelerate the transition, not only in the energy sector, but also transport and industry sectors as well. Turns out they are all now competing for key resources, lithium, zinc, minerals, which, however, suffer from delays in the chain of supply. To what extent can these delays be an obstacle to achieve the goals of the European institutions and the investment intentions and the plans that Bulgaria has laid down in its national plan for resilience and recovery, and the reforms we need to implement in the next few years? Hello. Thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure to take part in this conference, even though it's online. I'm sorry I can't be in Sofia with you. Of course, the supply issue is key. Uh, there's no doubt there are delays, and the delay is there already. There is also an increased demand, and this will result into a change in the investment plan. But we need to be more critical. This topic, uh, critically important material in new technology. On the other hand, gas, the issue of natural gas, on the other, is the wrong way to look at it. Very often it's being said that one type of dependence is replaced by another type of dependence, dependence on China. We need lithium to generate some types of energy. It is just one example. And the delay in supply will affect both timelines and prices and of course increase demand, but can increase demand force us to give up certain plans? It shows the direction in which the market is going, and this is important. We are not arguing anymore which energy is greener. We're talking about the supply of lithium and other materials, the installation of renewable facilities and energy storage. So market clearly gives us a signal what is expected. It's expected to generate renewable energy and look for new and more efficient technologies for that. So the issue here is not an issue of an economic dimension. It is a technological dimension, which we need to find a solution to. This conference is devoted to the region of Southeastern Europe. And I think we need not ask whether the technological transition is going to take place at the European level. It is already taking place at the EU level. And why not at the global level? Very often it's said that Europe burdens its energy, its industry, while Chinese is successfully developing using old technology. Sadly, this is not true. China is taking over Europe in a number of technological issues, not only because it manufactures them, but also because it actively invests into such technologies. And the technological transition is taking place. So the question is not whether it will take place. It is taking place already. The question is whether it will take place in Bulgaria or North Macedonia or Greece. The question is whether we can be the leaders in at least some of these forms of the transition. We do have the capacity. And in this call, we do have a demonstration of the fact that the human capital is there and that the region is powerful enough. What is needed is a more aggressive investment, and secondly, some smarter solutions. And if I may take 2 more minutes, allow me to dwell on both. A different issue, however, is who is going to provide the money. And this is a question that is being asked not only by by the politicians. This is the question, however, which is asked the wrong way. One keeps looking at the European Commission and EU funds for the money, which results into encouraging an increase in the emission tariffs, because the European Commission has no other source of funding all that. In the current environment of high inflation and the inflation of energy sources as well means that the money is there and the money is available, but not in the European budget. The money is available at the corporate level and in the energy sector. VAT, other assets, the contribution to the energy security system. However, increasing the price of emissions means that there would be money as well, but it has to be used uh, with targeted decisions. And most of these decisions cannot come from Brussels. Brussels only provides the framework. The decisions need to be made locally. And finally, concerning smart solutions, we do not need to repeat again and again that the currently existing transmission system and the grid cannot be supplied by renewable energy this year. And we should not keep repeating again and again um, that the sun does not shine at night, as Ilyana Iliev said. This seems to be great news. Apparently, nobody noticed that so far. We need to find ways to supply the system. So you see, we are saving electricity in the European Parliament, but there are other priorities of the Green Deal as well. It is much easier to provide renewable power to the railway system rather than export this power to Macedonia, for instance. It is much easier to supply the industry in a competitive manner. It is much easier to use the example of the industrial park Thrace, and future industrial parks in Bulgaria should follow this example. There should be internal systems partnerships between the generators and the consumers of energy. Co-generation should be something that brings about positive results rather than a euphemism for state aid to selected generators, a rather corrupt practice. So this is all a matter of partnership. We have already some rudimentary steps taken, but the window of opportunities is small. In every government, the situation erodes over time, so we have to make the most of the moment. Yes, I agree with you. Technological solutions are in place, and it's a matter of management to find more flexibility in the system. The examples are there. Still, over the years, we got used to getting a push to ambition from outside, from the European level, and then be guided to achieve this ambition in order to be more confident as to how to achieve our own priorities. So in this context, I'd like to raise the issue of regional cooperation. We know that at the beginning of this month, a declaration for cooperation between Bulgaria and Romania was signed in the field of renewable energy. This type of cooperation in renewable energy has always been encouraged a lot by the European institutions. So, in your view, what should the priorities and the initiatives be that the two countries can take part in order to be in the win-win situation and take advantage of the mechanisms of technical support and funding from the different European mechanisms that are in place? Who would like to begin? You are close, so perhaps you should begin. Just very briefly, this issue was addressed by the previous panel already. First of all, such regional incentive is there. The natural potential of the region is there, and the Black Sea region is an area where such development can take place. Moreover, I find it important to talk about the region, but I don't like us to focus on the region only. It's important to talk of these issues at the EU level. The regional cooperation must be supported, and this is no precedent. Such cooperation takes place among other countries in the region as well. However, it is important to talk about the general connectivity within the European Union, and this is key. When these discussions first started, whether it would be possible to uh, transfer energy from the northern part of Europe to southeastern part, for instance. These were the first talks which took place at the beginning of last year. At the time, it sounded pretty abstract. Well, now it seems more of a necessity. Mr. Kanev gave us a good example. We know the sun doesn't shine at night, but the excess renewable energy generated in a certain part of the union can be transferred to another part, and the regional cooperation can be a source which would benefit not only the region but the whole union as well. This type of connectivity should be guaranteed um, both to the north-south, but on the east and west, the east-west axis as well. And thus all the geographic and natural conditions which may hamper some regions in using some renewables. So these barriers could be lifted if only we have the infrastructure and connectivity among the different regions, not even the member states, but the regions within the union. That's right. And it seems we're not that well connected after all. Um, but this is an issue that needs to be resolved. Mr. Kanev, would you like to add something? Yes, gladly. For me, north-south in and improving contacts with the other two member states in the region for Bulgaria is a key issue. The Putin policy at the moment gave a push to accelerating these steps. Very often our policy was focused on the axis Istanbul, Belgrade, and we were focused on the Russian gas, which model of development I find hard to understand. Whether this has to do with some development goals or certain interests is a different issue. But the industrial and energy issues were neglected even before the end of the communist regime. At the moment, we are waking up. And I would like to ask a question which is probably not very clearly linked to what we are discussing. Do we know why, after the Balkan Wars, the sheep breeding, which created a lot of, which generated a lot of a lot of wealth, suddenly died? And this was because of the absence of connectivity. The sheep spend the summer in Bulgaria and the winter in Greece for obvious reasons. So as soon as this connectivity ended, the impact was clear, and the energy connectivity is also a way to resolve problems which seem difficult or impossible to resolve. Uh, we use Facebook and our telephones to find a solution to our energy problems. The memorandum of understanding between Bulgaria and Romania creates wonderful opportunities so long we want to implement them, not just joint absorption of the potential of the Black Sea region, where there is a lot of wind, strong wind, but also it creates a possibility um, to store energy. I was a shadow reporter on alternative fuels, and most of the countries in the East, particularly Bulgaria and Romania, the poorest, saw a dramatic uh, consequence in the need to supply this type of energy to some ports. Well, we still have the opportunity to be the first in the field and make our ports very competitive, the competitive advantage of the green energy that we can generate, and low carbon solutions. And Bulgaria and Romania have large ports, Constanța in Romania and Varna in Bulgaria. They are not direct competitors. They actually are mutually mutually supportive. We can become important terminals. We can be competitive in terms of transportation as well. I don't see what we would be losing. Thank you for mentioning the ports, which do have a potential to become decarbonization hubs, as we often call them. It's really worthwhile to discuss this issue in public. I have a long list of questions, but unfortunately we need to close. We are running very much behind time. So if the audience has questions, you can ask your questions to the two panelists. There seem to be no further questions from the audience. Thank you both for taking part in this panel, and we continue with the rest of our agenda. I am sure that the business perspective will be contributing to this discussion in the subsequent panels, namely how the cooperation between the individual countries can be implemented in order to accelerate the local and regional supply chains. Thank you.